Welcome back to this next video in which we are discussing the visual system. Okay, so we're in the process of discussing accommodation. So what I've discussed so far is the motivation for accommodation. We've discussed that the cornea and the lens are the refractive apparatus of the eye, and they are really important in focusing light that is coming from a point in the visual field onto a point of the retina. Okay, now we've discussed that this challenge of focusing light is going to be more difficult if we're looking at a point, a visual source that is closer to the eye than when we're looking at a source that is further away from the eye. And in order to focus light from a source that is closer to the eye, we're going to need a more powerful optical system than when we're trying to focus light that's coming from a point source that is further away from the eye. And this is why we need to be able to change the shape of the lens, change the refractive power of the lens in order to focus objects or light coming from objects that are different distances away from the eye. Okay, so we cannot change the shape of the cornea, we cannot change the refractive power of the cornea, we can, however, change the refractive power of the lens. And when we constrict the ciliary body muscle, when we contract that muscle and we constrict the ring of muscle down, that's going to relax the zonule of Zinn and therefore allow the lens to assume a more globular shape, and that's going to have a more powerful refractive power. Okay, it's going to be able to focus light that is more divergent in this way onto a point source. Okay, so a few little facts then. When the ciliary body is not contracted, okay, so when the ciliary body is completely relaxed and therefore the lens is in its flat state. Okay, so the lens at the moment is in its completely flat state. So we've got the cornea and the lens in its flat state. That optical system that we've got, the cornea with the flat lens, that is best suited for focusing light that is coming from sources 7 meters away from the eye. Okay, so that optical system focuses light ideally that is coming from objects 7 meters away, i.e. if I put the candle 7 meters away from the back of the eye, then with this conformation, i.e. with the cornea and the flat lens, it will be focused onto a nice point of the retina. Right, so what then if I bring a candle closer to the eye? Oh, and by the way, if you've got objects that are further away than 7 meters, then obviously you can't make the lens any more flat. So it's difficult to focus on objects that are more than 7 meters away. You can't do it as well as if they are precisely 7 meters away. Okay, and you might wonder, well, if it's further than 7 meters away, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that if it's further than 7 meters away, then the divergence of the light will be even less than if it is 7 meters away, and therefore it will actually be focused to a point in front of the retina, and then what you'll actually get is the light diverging because it's crossed over. So let me try and show this. So if we draw an eye here, so I'll just draw an eye here. So this is the iris and the pupil at the centre. Here's the cornea, and again we've got the lens here. So let's imagine that we've got light that's coming in that's almost parallel here, like so. So what will happen is it will be bent by the cornea. Whoops, and I should have drawn it being bent more by the cornea, but never mind. Let's have it being bent by the lens, and let's say that it would focus onto a point here. Okay, so you can see that it's focused, it's ready to focus here, but the retina isn't here. So what will now happen is these waves will cross over and you can see it's re-diverging out. Now this is an extreme example. Usually it would be focusing much closer to the retina, and therefore the amount that it would diverge out again would be hardly any. Okay, so it wouldn't be too bad focusing on objects further away, but you know from experience that it's difficult to focus on things that are very far away, and this is the reason that the light is going to start spreading out again, and therefore your ability to see in detail is going to be reduced, because you're going to get light sources spreading light onto larger portions of the retina that may well overlap, and therefore it's going to be more difficult to distinguish between two light sources. Okay, right, so that's what is going to start happening if we're looking at candles that are further than 7 meters away, but the problem isn't too big. I mean, I've made a very extreme example here. The actual amount that it will diverge out before it then hits the retina will be small. Okay, but the problem that we're more interested in, because we can actually do something about it, is what if we bring a candle closer than 7 meters? How can we focus on things that are closer than 7 meters to us? And the answer is that we're going to change the shape of the lens. We're going to make it more globular. So we're going to contract the ciliary body muscle. Okay, that will make the zonule of Zinn slack, and therefore the lens will adopt a more globular shape. So here is the more globular lens, and this more globular lens has a higher refractive power. Its ability to converge light is more powerful, and therefore it's going to be able to focus light coming from sources that are closer to the eye onto points on the back of the retina, whereas the flat lens, of course, the optical system would end up focusing the light from objects that are closer, but the point that it would be focused to would be behind the back of the retina. So they'd be trying to converge, but they wouldn't quite have converged by the time they hit the eye. So let me show you what would happen if we had the flat lens and we were looking at an object very close to us. So I'll just move this up a little bit. So here is the candle here, and we're now looking very close. We're looking at it with an eye that is very close. So here's our eye, here's the cornea, here's our flat lens, and now what will happen is here comes a light ray straight in. Now let's draw some ones that are on more of an angle. Here's one, and what would happen is they would be converging, but it wouldn't actually get to a nice point unless the retina was much further back, basically. So the point of convergence would be much further back, and it's difficult to show this with this small picture. But my point is that they haven't quite been focused to a point at the point where we're getting to the back of the retina. So the focus isn't perfect with this flat lens. But if we turn the lens into the globular form, then the power of that to bend the light will be better, and now it will be able to focus this light onto a point on the back of the retina. In contrast, now if we were to use the globular lens to look at something that was 7 meters away, it would now be focused too early, so the point at which it would be focused to would be in front of the retina, and therefore you'd have this problem again where objects further away would appear out of focus. So we need to switch between having a flat lens and a globular lens when we're looking at objects that are different distances away, and this is what accommodation is all about. Okay, so you can make the lens more and more globular, and this allows you to focus on point sources of light that are closer and closer to your eye. However, there is a limit to this, and I can show you your limit to this. So if you cover up one of your eyes, so maybe put one of your hands in front of your left-hand eye, and take a piece of paper. Okay, so here's an example of a piece of paper, the piece of paper from earlier, and bring it very, very close to your eye that is uncovered, so your right eye, and if you bring it close enough, you'll find that the words come out of focus. You won't be able to see the words clearly anymore. Okay, move it closer and closer to your eye. So for a long time you'll be able to see the words, but as you bring it really close to your eyes, bring it up to where your nose is, you'll find that you can no longer read the words. It goes out of focus. And here's the scary thing. Bring it to the end of your nose, and you'll find, I certainly find, that the words are out of focus if I bring the piece of paper right to the end of my nose. The scary thing is that when you were 6 years old, it wouldn't have been out of focus. As a child, you would have been able to read those words of a piece of paper that was only at the end of your nose. Okay, so unfortunately the power of our refractive apparatus within our eyes is gradually getting less and less as we get older, and as we indeed get very old, we can no longer focus on things that are even at an arm's length away from us, and that's the point where we need reading glasses, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail when we come on to refractive errors, which is about now. Okay, so we've now been over how the eye actually focuses light. So we've seen the motivation for why we need this optic apparatus to focus light within the eye. We've seen that otherwise the image would be completely blurry. We wouldn't actually be able to make sense of it. The refractory apparatus within the eye is all about making sure that light sources from a point of the visual field are going to have all the light that's entering the pupil from that source focused onto a single point on the surface of the retina. Right. We've also seen that you need this accommodation phenomenon, which is where we can change the shape of the lens to make it more globular so that we can focus light that is coming from a source that is closer to the eye. So remember, when the ciliary body is completely relaxed and the lens is in its completely flat form, that is ideal for focusing objects, point sources of light that are 7 meters away from the eye onto points on the back of the retina. If, however, you've got a source of light that is closer to the eye than 7 meters, it's going to be out of focus. The point at which it would be focused using the cornea and the flat lens would be behind the retina, like this picture here. So what we need to do is we need to turn the lens into its globular form, and there we will have a more powerful optical system then, and that will be able to focus the photons that are coming from this point source closer to us onto a point on the back of the retina. Right, so that's what accommodation is all about. I'd like to finish this discussion of the optics of the eye by talking about certain refractive error conditions. So when we say that someone is suffering from a refractive error, what this means is that the refractive process, the optical apparatus within the eye, is not functioning perfectly and light is not being focused in the way that it should. So I want to talk about long-sightedness, short-sightedness, and also presbyopia. Okay, so refractive errors then, different types of refractive errors. So we'll start off with myopia, which is the fancy way of saying short-sightedness. Okay, so this is where you are very good at focusing on objects that are near to you, but you are not very good at focusing on objects that are far away from you, hence why it's called short-sightedness. And I think usually people put a dash in between short and sightedness. Okay, so I'll repeat that. You're very good at seeing things that are close to you, but not so good at seeing things that are further away from you. So your eye struggles with focusing light coming from point sources that are in the distance onto the back of the retina. And the usual reason for short-sightedness is not a problem with the lens, it's not a problem with the cornea. The problem is usually that the thickness of the eye, the diameter of the eye backwards is abnormal, it's too long. So normally the diameter of the eye backwards, the distance from like the pupil here to the back of the eye here, that's usually around 24 millimeters, so 2.4 centimeters, so that sort of distance there. Whereas in short-sightedness, in people who are short-sighted or an eye that is short-sighted, what usually happens is the backward diameter of the eye is greater. So if I draw this, and I'm going to draw it really extremely so you get the idea. Okay, it wouldn't usually be this extreme, but it gets the message across, this picture, very well. So what you can see now is that the backward diameter of the eye is much longer. Now what's this actually going to mean? Well, this is going to cause a problem with focusing light. This is going to cause an abnormality with focusing light, because now the retina is much further back than it would be, but the optical apparatus here is exactly the same. So it will be focusing light in exactly the same way, but where would the light normally be focused onto? Well, it would be normally focused onto the normal position for the retina, which will be where this dashed line is. So by the time the light gets to where the retina actually is, it will have re-diverged. So this is why the problem arises. So if you now imagine looking at something that is 7 meters away, so imagine a candle 7 meters away. To look at something 7 meters away, we'd want the lens to be completely flat, so we'd have the ciliary body completely relaxed. And now even with the ciliary body completely relaxed, light from that candle that's 7 meters away would be focused onto where this dashed line is here. and therefore by the time it actually reaches the retina back here, it's going to have re-diverged out in this way here, which is why objects that are far away from you are going to appear blurry. You're not going to be able to see objects that are far away from you very well. You're not going to be able to focus on point sources of light that are far away from you. However, this setup is absolutely fantastic for seeing things that are close to you, because now, if we say have a candle that's much closer to you, you're not going to have to bother to contract the ciliary muscle anymore, because of the fact that your eye is this way. So let me show you. So we've got an object much closer this time. Okay, and normally in someone who is not short-sighted, you would have to now make the lens more globular. You'd have to contract the ciliary muscle and make the lens more globular. But in someone who's short-sighted, you're not going to have to bother. You see, the reason is that even with this low-power refractory apparatus, because the retina is now further away, this low-power refractory apparatus is going to be able to focus the light onto a point because the retina is further away. So let me show you this. So here's the light coming from this point source. It'll be focused on, and you can see if we had a normal eye, a not short-sighted eye, it wouldn't have focused by this point. Okay, the light wouldn't have been focused onto a normal retina, but because the retina is further away, the light will now be focused. And, well, that's not even going to get in, but I'll draw it going in anyway. There we go. So the point is that because the diameter of the eye is increased, the retina is now further away. So these light photons here that wouldn't have previously been focused onto the back of the retina, because if the retina's here, you can see it wouldn't have been focused, it would have been onto a great big patch of retina. They now are going to be focused because the retina's further back. And this means that you don't have to bother contracting the ciliary muscle, which requires energy, of course. It requires a strain. You don't have to bother contracting the ciliary muscle in order to focus light that is coming from nearby sources onto the back of the retina. And it's believed that short-sightedness actually arises from reading too many books. There is an association between people who read a lot of books as children and short-sightedness. And the reason is thought to be that if you spend a lot of time reading books whilst you're a child, then of course you're looking at things that are very close to you. And whilst your eye is not short-sighted, so whilst you've got a normal diameter eye, you are having to continuously keep your ciliary body muscles contracted in order to focus on those words of the books that are close to you. And this, of course, is a strain. This means that the ciliary muscle is continuously being used, and it doesn't like being continuously used. So the idea is that as you grow older, your eye adapts to this and increases the diameter, and it's a very clever adaptation so that you are now better at focusing on objects that are near to you, and you don't have to strain your ciliary muscles. So that's what is thought to underlie why some people become short-sighted, and why short-sightedness is increasing, because, of course, we're encouraging people reading and reading and reading. It's considered a good thing. Okay, but it does cause, we think at least, it does cause short-sightedness. So how do you correct short-sightedness? Well, you need to put a lens in place that is actually going to diverge light, that is actually going to unfocus light, because the problem with this is that the light is being, from far away objects, is being focused before the retina actually is there. Okay, so it's being focused onto where the retina would normally be rather than where the retina actually is, and then it's diverged by the time it actually gets to where the retina is. So we need a lens that is actually going to unfocus the light and is going to make it more divergent, so that this refractive apparatus here of this eye will only focus the light by the time that it's actually got to the where the retina actually is, rather than where the retina is. And for this reason we give them convex lenses. So, not convex lenses, concave lenses. So lenses that look like this, concave lenses, also called negative lenses. So when light goes into these, like so if we've got light coming in here, and let's say it's divergent light, it's actually going to be diverged even further, so the light's going to be made to diverge even further. So that means that when the light enters the eye, it's going to be more divergent, and therefore this refractive apparatus is going to take longer to focus it, so it will be focused at a further away distance, which is perfect, and therefore you will actually be able to see objects that are far away from you. But of course you won't need these on when you're reading things close to you. You'd only need these for looking at things long away. But even if you were wearing the concave lenses and you were to look at something close to you, you'd then just have to contract your ciliary body like everyone else, and you'd still be able to focus on objects nearby. Okay, so concave lenses are used in the treatment of short-sightedness. Next, let's go on to the treatment of, discuss long-sightedness. So we've discussed short-sightedness now, let's go on to discuss long-sightedness. So long-sightedness is also called hyperopia or hypermetropia. So I'll write this here. So hypermetropia is a fancy word for long-sightedness. Another fancy term for long-sightedness is just to call it hyperopia. And as the name, and I've missed off the long-sightedness, but you get the idea. So as the name suggests, if you are long-sighted, if an eye is long-sighted, then that eye is very good at seeing objects that are far away, but it's not so good at seeing objects that are close by. Right, and long-sightedness usually occurs for the exact opposite reason to why short-sightedness occurs. So we've seen that short-sightedness is going to occur when the diameter of the eye backwards is too long. In long-sightedness, it's going to occur because the diameter of the eye is too small. So let me now show this, and again I'll draw a very extreme picture to get the message across. So here, the backwards diameter of the eye is going to be too small. So here's the cornea, here's the lens here, and this is where the retina would usually be, in dashed lines here, whereas this is where the retina actually is going to be. So in people who are long-sighted, the diameter of the eye is too small, below 24 millimeters, and now what's going to happen? Well, of course, the problem is that the retina is far too close to the refractive apparatus here, so we're going to struggle to focus light onto this retina that is closer to us. So, if we're looking at something 7 meters away, and let's say originally that we have this flat lens, are we going to have a focused image on the back of our retina? Well, the answer is no, because something that's 7 meters away will be focused by this flat lens refractive system here onto where the retina should be, onto the dashed line. However, we can correct that, you see. We can make the ciliary body contract. And if the ciliary body contracts, then the lens will go globular, and therefore the refractive power of our optic system here will increase, and therefore we will be able to focus the light from 7 meters away onto this retina that is closer towards the refractive apparatus than it should be. Okay, so you can see things that are far away still. Okay, so you're very good at seeing things far away, and in fact you will be able to see objects that are further away than 7 meters. You'll be able to focus on things that are further than 7 meters away. Remember, someone with a normal diameter eye, they can focus brilliantly on things that are 7 meters away, but they can't make the refractive apparatus, the lens and the cornea, any weaker. So you can't actually focus brilliantly on objects that are further than 7 meters away. People who are long-sighted will be able to focus brilliantly on things that are further away, because they will now be brought into focus on the back of this retina, because the retina's brought forward. However, are these people going to be able to see things that are very close to them? The answer is no, because they'll make their lens as globular as possible, but even then, certain things that are very close will be brought into focus where the retina usually is, and therefore wouldn't have been brought into focus with the retina forward in this way. So you're going to have problems seeing things that are close to you. And this sort of refractive error is treated with the more classical lenses, the convex lenses or the positive lenses, which are going to actually help focus light. So this is a convex or a positive lens. Right, so this will help converge light. So if we've got divergent light coming in, like so, this will start the convergence process, and then the light will already have been converged somewhat before it goes into the eye's refractive apparatus here, and therefore it's going to help bring this light into focus at this retina that's further forward. So when you're looking at something that is close by and the light's diverging out, this the apparatus of the eye, the cornea, and the very globular lens, that's not powerful enough on its own to bring the light into focus on the back of the retina here. So we need to add this additional lens in to add more refractive power there. So that's why we put in this convex lens, and that's how you treat people who are long-sighted. Right, and then the final thing that I want to mention is presbyopia, and I've already mentioned this somewhat. So presbyopia. So firstly, what does this word mean? So it's derived from words in Greek. So presbos in Greek means old, and ops in Greek means eye. So this is to do with being old and something that happens to your eyes. So presbyopia is the condition that older age people get. And this is where gradually the eye loses its capacity to focus on things that are nearby. So we're all familiar with this, that as you get older you need glasses for reading. You lose your ability to focus on words of books that are close to you and you require reading glasses. The fancy word for this condition is presbyopia. And what's actually happening in presbyopia is that the lens, it's a problem with the lens. The eye's lens loses its elasticity. So we've discussed how the lens is usually being pulled into this flat shape by the zonule of Zinn, which is attached to the ciliary body. And we've discussed that when the ciliary body contracts, what will happen is the zonule of Zinn will go slack, and the lens will adopt this globular shape. And it adopts that globular shape because of its elasticity. It wants to go into that shape. Well, as you get older, what gradually happens is the lens loses its elasticity and it loses the will to adopt that globular shape. So how globular the lens can become gradually becomes less as you get older. So it becomes flatter and flatter and doesn't really want to adopt that globular shape again. So the maximal globularity, if you like, that the lens can become is going to get lower as we get older. So if I draw a little picture for this, so when you're young, here is the flat lens, and then let's say here is how globular your lens can become. So let's say this is the maximum globular form of the lens. This is as globular as it can get. As you become older, there's nothing wrong with the flat form of the lens, but it can't become as globular anymore. So it might just get to this sort of globularity. So how powerful you can make the refractive apparatus of your eye becomes less and less, and this means that you can no longer focus on objects that are as close to your eye. So when you're very young, you will be able to focus on things that are at the tip of your nose. Okay, you'll be able to bring those into focus. As you get older and older and older, the nearest things that you can bring into focus with the refractive apparatus of your eye gets gradually further and further away, and the reason is that the lens is losing its elasticity, it's losing the ability to become so globular, and therefore the maximum refractive power that you can get is smaller, and this means that you can focus on things that are only further and further away from you. So as you get older and older and older, you're not going to be able to focus on things that are an arm's length away from you, and you're going to require reading glasses. And as I say, if you want a little glimpse into what this is like, take a piece of paper and bring it right up to your eye with words on it and see if you can read those words, and you'll find that you can't. And that's what it's going to become, and later on in life it will become like that, further and further away from you. Okay, unfortunately. Right, so that's presbyopia, and the way that we treat that is again with convex lenses that will increase the refractive power of the refractive apparatus of the eye and help to converge the light up to a single point. And therefore you'll be able to use those glasses for reading. But of course it doesn't cause any problem with seeing things far away, it's just for reading. That's what presbyopia is all about. So those are the 3 refractive errors that I want to discuss. Those are the simple ones: short-sightedness, long-sightedness, and presbyopia. We will end this video here, and in the next video what we will discuss is the structure of the retina.